The Dragon King. Ajarion the Unshaken was known across every land touched by firelight. His throne room, deep inside the volcanic citadel of Pyrestone, shone like a heart of living flame. Lava streams ran through channels on the floor, glowing like veins of gold, and the air trembled with warm heat that wrapped around anyone who entered. Yet the most powerful presence in the hall was not the heat nor the roar of magma. It was the king himself. Ajarion sat upon a throne carved from black obsidian, his scales brighter than molten metal and his eyes glowing like twin suns. But no matter how bright his fire burned, there was always one thing missing from his ancient face: a smile. Not the faintest curve of the lips, not a spark of amusement. Nothing. For hundreds of years, no creature, warrior, or sorcerer had made him smile even once. It was not because he hated joy. It was because he could not find a single being worthy of it. Every year, champions from many realms arrived to compete in the Dragon King's test of worthiness. The test was old, so old that no one remembered the original purpose. Some said it measured bravery, others said it judged strength. More ambitious stories claimed it proved who would carry the Dragon King's blessing in the battles of the future. But the truth was simpler and deeper, though only Ajarion knew it. He was searching for something lost, something rare, something he feared the world no longer possessed. And every year, when another proud challenger stepped forward and failed, Ajarion's disappointment grew heavier. It pressed on him like cooled stone, turning his heart dull, making his fiery breath burn low. Some of the younger dragons whispered that the king's eternal scowl was now a part of the citadel, like the magma rivers or the stone pillars. Perhaps it would never change. Still, Ajarion tried, and still, every warrior failed. This year, the line of challengers was especially long. Word had spread across realms of fire, wind, water, and even distant stars that the king had not smiled in 200 years. Rumor said that whoever made him smile would receive a treasure beyond imagination. Maybe command of the royal worm guard, maybe a shard of the king's own flame, or maybe something even stranger. Warriors arrived with bright armor, glowing swords, and fancy speeches. They carried banners of kingdoms and tribes, each hoping to impress the stern Dragon King. The throne hall became crowded from dawn until the last light of evening lava, but no matter how grand the warrior, no matter how dramatic their performance, no matter how confident they were that they alone understood the king, each one failed. Some fought illusions the king created. They showed skill, strength, and pride, but pride impressed him the least. Some attempted riddles or clever tricks, hoping intelligence would be enough. It was not. Some tried pure boldness, walking up to the king and declaring that their courage proved their worth. Ajarion barely blinked at them. Others tried soulful words about honor, respect, or destiny. He heard the words but felt no sincerity. The test changed for every challenger, but the result stayed the same. Ajarion would watch, study them, and then rumble one quiet sentence. "You may depart." No anger. No cruelty, just a heavy, calm refusal. And the warrior would walk away ashamed, knowing they now joined the long list of failures. By midday of the final day of testing, the throne hall was almost empty. Only advisors, guards, and a few curious young dragons remained. Ajarion's heavy tail tapped the floor, leaving deep marks in the stone every time. His advisor, Elder Quirael, shifted nervously each time the tail struck. It was never a good sign. "Your Majesty," Quirael said carefully, "shall we call for challengers from farther lands? Perhaps from the northern ice realms? They may have—" Ajarion lifted one claw, silencing him. "No. Enough warriors, enough proud souls. None understand." There was nothing harsh about his voice, only tiredness. A very old, very ancient tiredness. Quirael bowed. "Then perhaps the test should rest for another century." Before Ajarian could answer, a small commotion echoed from the hallway behind the throne. Two guards walked by, grumbling loudly. Behind them was a human stable boy, sweeping dust from the floor with a straw broom, his clothes simple, his hands a bit rough from work. His name was Joran Hale, though almost no one in the citadel bothered to learn it. He worked quietly with the pyro-worm hatchlings in the far stables, brushing their scales, feeding them mineral mash, and singing little tunes to them when they had trouble sleeping. Humans were not common in Pyrestone, and most dragons thought of them as too soft and too fragile for serious tasks. So chores like sweeping, cleaning, and feeding hatchlings were simply handed to humans without much thought. Joran did not mind. He liked the wormlings. He liked the warm halls. He liked the peace of simple work. But he did have one habit that sometimes annoyed the guards. He whispered comments under his breath. He didn't mean to criticize, but he had a way of noticing things others did not. And sometimes, the words just slipped out. Today, as he swept near the throne hall's entrance, he spoke softly to himself without noticing that the guards had paused to drink water nearby. "Well," Joran muttered, "no wonder the Dragon King never smiles. Everyone keeps trying to show off. Maybe someone should try understanding instead." The guards froze. Quirael froze. Even Ajarion's ears twitched. Joran looked up, confused. He had not realized he'd spoken so loudly. The elder advisor slowly turned toward him. "Repeat what you just said." Joran's broom almost slipped from his hands. Nothing, sir. Just talking to myself. I do that sometimes." Quirael narrowed his eyes. "You said something about understanding." Joran gulped. "Well, yes. But I didn't mean any disrespect. It's just that everyone comes in here trying to prove they are the strongest or smartest. No one tries to understand what the king is actually looking for. But I'm only a stable boy, so I'm sure I'm wrong." Ajarion's voice, deep as rolling thunder, cut through the air. "Bring him forward." The hall went silent. Every dragon stared at the human boy as if he had just insulted the king. Joran felt his knees weaken, but he forced himself to step forward, broom still in hand, because he didn't know what else to do. Quirael leaned close to the king. "Your Majesty, he is not a warrior, not even a trainee. He is simply a mind that speaks truth, even by accident, is still a mind worth testing," Ajarian said calmly. Joran almost dropped his broom. Me? Take the test?" he whispered. The king's glowing eyes lowered to Joran. "You spoke of understanding. Then let us see whether you understand more than the warriors who failed before you." Joran felt heat climb up his neck. Every dragon in the hall watched him, some amused, some confused, some even annoyed that a human stable boy would stand where great warriors once stood. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "Your Majesty, I sweep floors. I feed hatchlings. I have no armor or magic or skills. Surely there is someone—" "There is no one left," Ajarian said simply. "And fate has placed you here. That is enough." Joran swallowed hard. He had no idea how he had ended up in this situation. He had come here today only to clean the entrance and later bring fresh stones for the hatchlings to chew. He had never dreamed of standing before the Dragon King, much less being told to take a legendary test. But something in the king's voice, calm, steady, heavy with old patience, made Joran straighten his back. I will try," he said, barely above a whisper. Ajarian nodded once. "Good." The hall shifted. Heat rippled. The channels of lava brightened. A stone pedestal rose slowly from the center of the floor, as if answering some ancient call. Joran stared at it, heart pounding. Ajarian's voice echoed through the great hall. "Let the final test begin." And so, The human stable boy, who should never have been anywhere near a warrior's challenge, found himself stepping toward a destiny no one, not even a dragon king, had expected. Joran Hale never imagined that so many eyes could watch one person at the same time. As he stepped deeper into the Dragon King's throne hall, he felt the heavy silence pressing all around him. The lava streams glowed brighter, as if even the flames were curious about the strange human boy who had accidentally spoken a little too honestly. The boy held his broom tightly, unsure whether he should put it down or keep it with him for comfort. His legs felt shaky, and the heat in the hall seemed 10 times hotter than it had ever felt before. Maybe because he knew now that the Dragon King himself was watching his every move, and not just watching, judging. The throne room stretched wide, with huge stone pillars reaching into the high ceiling like the ribs of a sleeping giant. Dragons of different sizes stood along the edges, some wearing armor of glowing metal, others with wings folded neatly behind them. They whispered among themselves, but even their whispers sounded like distant thunder. Is that the human boy from the stables? Impossible. A test candidate? A joke, surely. He will faint before the test even begins. Joran heard every word, but he kept walking. He wasn't brave, he knew that. But he also knew that running away right now would be worse. It would show fear, and he didn't want the Dragon King to think he was only a frightened child. When he reached the center of the hall, the stone pedestal that had risen from the ground stood waiting for him. It was smooth, dark, and warm to the touch. But what sat on top of it made Joran's breath freeze for a moment. A dragon egg. Not a large one like the giant eggs he sometimes saw in the upper hatchery, which needed entire fire pits to stay warm. This one was small, about the size of a large fruit, but it looked different. The shell was dark and cracked in places, as if struggling to hold itself together. Thin lines of cooled magma curled around its surface, and the faintest light flickered inside it like a dying ember. Joran stared at it, confused. He had expected a test of fire or strength or riddles, something grand, something dangerous. But an egg? He didn't understand. Behind him, Elder Kirael stepped forward. Your Majesty, surely the boy needs guidance. He has never seen a royal test before. But the Dragon King shook his head slowly. Understanding does not grow from guidance. It grows from the heart. Joran swallowed. His throat felt dry. He glanced up at the king. Ajarian's eyes were calm, glowing softly. For a moment, they didn't feel frightening at all, only deep and ancient, filled with something Joran could not name. Ajarian's voice filled the hall. It was low, but powerful enough to make the floor hum. This is the test. Revive what should not be revivable. Bring warmth where there is only cold. Joran blinked. Revive? But the egg looks... He didn't want to say dead. That felt wrong. The king finished for him. It is fading. Life lies within it, but only faintly. The warriors before you tried to force it awake. They used power without purpose, heat without care, strength without patience. And the life within the egg shrank back from their touch. Joran felt his heart twist a little. He had seen frightened wormlings before. Small, shy creatures who hid behind wooden crates when thunder struck or cried when they could not find their fire breath for the first time. He knew that forcing them never helped. In fact, it only made them retreat more. He looked again at the egg. A tiny sound came from within, a weak scrape, like a creature too tired to call for help. The hall was silent. Hundreds of eyes watched him. The Dragon King waited. Joran took a deep breath, then set down his broom. He stepped closer to the pedestal, gently placing both hands around the egg. The shell felt cold, much colder than any dragon egg should ever be. Dragon eggs needed warmth to survive. Lots of it. Constant heat. Yet this egg felt abandoned, as if it had been left in winter. His hands trembled at first, but he didn't pull away. He lifted the egg slowly, cradling it as if it were made of glass. The warmth of his skin seemed tiny compared to the heat of the flames around him, but it was all he had to offer. Joren sat down cross-legged on the warm stone floor, settling the egg in his lap. The dragons watching him exchanged confused looks. "This is his strategy?" one whispered. "He is sitting? Is he praying or giving up?" Joren didn't listen to them. He only listened to the soft sound inside the egg, the small scrape, the faint crack, the breath of a frightened creature trying to survive. He had no magic, no power, no ancient warrior skills. But he had spent years caring for wormlings, calming them, helping them sleep, warming them on cold nights. He knew their fears. He knew their tiny heartbeats. He did the only thing he knew how to do. He held the egg close, brought it against his chest to share his body heat, and began humming quietly. A simple tune, a gentle one. The same melody he used in the stables when the smallest wormlings were lonely or scared. At first, nothing happened. The hall remained silent. Dragons frowned. Kirael sighed in defeat, but Ajarion watched closely, and slowly, very slowly. The egg responded. A weak glow flickered beneath the cracked shell. The cold, smooth surface warmed slightly under Joren's hands. The tiny scraping inside grew stronger, as if the creature within was finally brave enough to move. Joren didn't stop humming. He kept his movements slow and steady. He brushed his thumb lightly across the shell, not pushing, not forcing, just reassuring the creature inside that it wasn't alone. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The dragons shifted restlessly. Finally, a bright crack line shot across the shell. Joren gasped softly. His heart leaped. He held the egg steady, guiding it, encouraging but not rushing. Another crack, then another. The egg shook weakly, and a small piece of shell broke away, falling into Joren's lap. A tiny sound rose from inside, soft, squeaky, fragile. A newborn dragon. The hall went dead silent. A thin snout pushed out through the hole, trembling. Two small golden eyes blinked up at the world for the first time. The little wormling squeaked again, then lifted its head toward Joren as if sensing the warmth that had saved it. Joren felt tears sting his eyes. He gently cupped his hands around the baby dragon. Careful not to touch the soft new scales too strongly. The wormling pressed itself into his palms, alive. Weak, but alive. He looked up shyly, unsure of what would happen next. But what he saw stole the breath from his lungs. The Dragon King was still, completely still. His bright eyes were wide, shining not with anger or disappointment, but with pure, quiet wonder. He stepped down from his throne, a rare thing, each movement slow, deliberate. The air trembled as he approached Joren. Dragons bowed their heads as the king passed. Ajarion stopped in front of the stable boy, staring at the tiny wormling in his hands. His great head lowered, and for a moment he simply looked, really looked. Then something unbelievable happened. His lips curved. It was small, barely there, but it was real. The Dragon King smiled. Gasps filled the hall. Even the lava seemed to bubble in surprise. Kirael's jaw dropped open so wide Joren worried it might never close again. Ajarion spoke softly, his voice echoing like warm thunder. "For centuries, I searched for a heart that could give life instead of taking it, a heart that understood instead of conquering, a heart that listens." His eyes softened. A human stable boy has succeeded where 1,000 warriors have failed. Joren's face burned with shock. He didn't know what to do. Should he bow, stand, speak? His mind couldn't decide. The baby dragon squeaked again, curling into his hands. Ajarion's smile grew the tiniest bit. "And the hatchling has chosen you." Joren's heart nearly exploded. Me? But I'm just... The king interrupted gently. No, you are Joran Hale, and today you have proven yourself worthy not through power, but through kindness. The hall erupted in noise, shouts, cheers, disbelief. Dragons who had doubted him now looked at him with awe. Some whispered that the king's smile would change the entire realm. Others said a new age was beginning. Joran didn't know about any of that. He only knew one thing. His simple act of care had changed something great, something ancient, something deep within the Dragon King himself. And though he didn't feel like a hero, he had just become the most important human in the Citadel. The throne hall of Pyrestone had never felt so alive. After the newborn wormling hatched in Joran's hands, the air changed. Flames along the walls burned brighter, as if celebrating. Dragons whispered to one another with excitement. Their voices no longer filled with doubt or boredom, but with curiosity and respect. Joran, however, felt overwhelmed. He sat on the warm floor, the tiny dragon curled against his palms, and his heart still beat so fast that he worried others might hear it. A mixture of fear, surprise, and pride swirled inside him. Only a short time ago, he had been sweeping dust near the entrance, planning to return to the stables by evening. Now the entire citadel seemed to be looking at him as if he had done something legendary. He wasn't sure what to do next. He wasn't sure he understood what had happened. The small wormling squeaked softly, drawing his attention. Its little body was warm now, glowing faintly with newborn fire. Its scales were a pale gold, soft and delicate like thin petals of sunlight. The baby dragon blinked slow. Sleepy eyes at Joran, as if recognizing him as the first warm presence it had ever known. Joran couldn't help but smile. "Hello there," he whispered gently. The wormling nuzzled his thumb. Behind him, a low rumble spread through the hall, the sound of the Dragon King stepping forward. Ajarion's giant claws clicked softly against the stone floor. Each movement was powerful, yet strangely calm. The warrior dragons bowed their heads, but Joran only sank deeper into his seat, unsure whether he should bow or freeze. Ajarion stopped only a few steps away and lowered his great head until his glowing eyes were level with the boys. "Tell me," the king rumbled, "why did you hold the egg the way you did?" Joran's mind froze. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. After a moment, he answered honestly, "Because it sounded scared." Ajarion's eyes brightened with interest. "Scared?" Joran nodded slowly. "Yes, the little scraping inside. It sounded like a creature that didn't know what to do. Maybe it was cold or alone. So I just did what I always do with the wormlings in the stables. I held it close. I warmed it. I let it know it wasn't alone." The king tilted his head slightly, emotion almost too gentle for such a massive creature. "Did you use magic?" "No, Your Majesty." "Did you use ancient techniques?" "No." "Did you try to prove something?" Joran shook his head. "I just wanted it to be okay." Whispers filled the room once again, but this time they were different, softer, thoughtful. Ajarion lifted his head, looking toward his gathered dragons. "You see," he said quietly, yet his voice carried across the hall. For centuries, warriors believed this test was about strength, or skill, or power. They tried to command the egg. They tried to force it open. They tried to awaken life by showing their own greatness. He turned back to Joran. But life does not answer commands. It answers care. The hall fell silent. Joran felt his cheeks warm. He wasn't used to being praised, especially not by someone as powerful as the Dragon King. He didn't know how to respond to such words, so he simply held the wormling closer, hoping he didn't look foolish. Ajarion noticed and let out a very soft rumbling sound, a sound that, surprisingly, carried a hint of amusement. He glanced at Elder Quirael. "Record this day." Quirael bowed quickly. "Of course, Your Majesty." Ajarion then addressed Joren again. "Rise, Joren Hale." Joren stood slowly. Careful not to disturb the baby dragon. His legs wobbled slightly, but he managed to stay upright. "You succeeded in the test," the king said. "But the test is not finished." Joren blinked in confusion. "Not finished?" Ajarion nodded. "The egg is revived, but the creature who hatched must now be guided, and its bond must be proven." Joren's eyes widened. "Bond?" The king gestured toward the wormling resting in Joren's hands. "It has chosen you, but choice is only the first step. You must show the hall why it chose you. You must show that your heart matches your actions." Joren's stomach flipped. He looked down at the little dragon, who yawned adorably and curled into his palm. "How do I do that?" Ajarion stepped aside, motioning with one wing toward a large circular space near the center of the hall. The crowd parted, creating a wide open area. "You will complete a second part of the test, one that only appears when the first part succeeds." Joren's heart thumped loudly. He followed where the king had pointed. The floor beneath the open space began to glow, symbols slowly revealing themselves, ancient runes shaped like fire drops, wings, and stars. The light they gave off was bright but gentle, like warm morning sunlight. Dragons shifted around the edges, watching closely. "What must I do?" Joren asked quietly. Ajarion looked down at him. "Stay calm. Stay true. Let the wormling guide you." Joren stared. That was it? No weapons, no ceremony, no instructions. His confusion must have shown on his face because Ajarion added, "The second test is not for the mind. It is for the spirit." Joren nodded uncertainly. He stepped carefully into the glowing circle, holding the wormling gently. The moment he entered, the runes brightened, and warm wind swirled upward, circling him like a quiet breeze. The baby dragon lifted its tiny head, blinking in surprise. Then it chirped once, a soft, curious sound. Suddenly the symbols in the floor pulsed. The entire hall darkened. The lava dimmed. Torches flickered. Even the king's eyes seemed to lose some of their light. Joren gasped as the air around him shifted. Shadows stretched out across the room, bringing with them a strange stillness. The glowing runes under Joren's feet remained bright, but everything else turned quiet and dim as if the citadel had fallen into a deep dream. "What's happening?" Joren whispered. Ajarion's voice echoed lightly, though he had not moved. "The test of spirit. What you see now depends on your heart." Joren felt the temperature drop. A chill brushed his neck. The darkness formed shapes around him, shapes made from old fears and quiet worries. He saw images of dragons roaring in anger, images of himself failing, images of the wormling fading back into the egg. Joren squeezed the baby dragon gently. "No, that's not real," he whispered. The shadows pressed closer, forming dark silhouettes that tried to frighten him. They towered above him, whispering doubts. "You are only a stable boy. You do not belong here. You will drop the wormling. You will disappoint the king." Joren closed his eyes tightly. He felt his breath shake. His heart raced. But then, a little sound, a soft chirp. The wormling pressed its tiny head against his chest, as if reminding him that it was real, warm, alive. Joren opened his eyes, focusing only on the small dragon. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm here." He lifted the wormling closer, cradling it against him. The shadows faltered. He took a slow breath, then another. He remembered the stables. Quiet nights with the baby dragons, evenings when storms frightened them, mornings when he warmed them with soft cloths or gentle words. He remembered how simply being there, calm, steady, helped them relax. He did the same now. He hummed the same tune he had used for the egg earlier. The wormling responded immediately, eyes closing, body relaxing. The shadows melted away. Light filled the hall once more. The lava brightened, the torches flared. Dragons gasped. Joran stood in the center of the glowing circle, holding the calm, content wormling in his hands. The Dragon King stepped forward again. But this time he looked not just pleased, but proud. "The test of spirit," he said, "is past." Joran let out a long breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Dragons around the hall murmured in awe. Some nodded in admiration. Others looked stunned. A few young dragons even cheered quietly. Ajarion lowered his head until he was once again level with Joran. "You did not fight the shadows," the king said softly. "You did not fear them. You simply stayed true to your purpose." Joran blinked. "My purpose?" Ajarian smiled, not wide, but warm. "To care. That is your strength." Joran looked down at the wormling. The tiny creature opened one eye, chirped softly, and curled even more comfortably in his hands. He felt pride swell inside him, not loud pride, but quiet, real pride. The test was complete. But his journey was only beginning. The throne hall of Pyrestone had seen many great events through the centuries, celebrations, battles, raids, and royal ceremonies. But nothing had ever moved the dragons the way this moment did. A human stable boy, small and ordinary in appearance, stood in the center of ancient ruins with a newborn wormling in his hands. And the Dragon King himself was smiling at him. Dragons who had never shown emotion gasped. Some blinked rapidly in disbelief. Others whispered excitedly, as if they were watching a legend form before their eyes. But Joran didn't notice any of that. His entire focus was on the tiny wormling curled against his hands, glowing softly with new life. The little creature had fallen asleep after the test of spirit, breathing gently with a faint puff of warm air each time. Joran couldn't stop staring at it with wonder. This small life trusted him completely. He still didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like he had done something incredible. He only felt responsible, deeply responsible, for this little dragon. Ajarian stepped closer, his great wings folding behind him. The floor trembled lightly with each step, yet his movements were soft, almost careful, as if he didn't want to disturb the newborn. All eyes were on him. Ajarion lowered his head to look at Joran and the tiny dragon. When he spoke, his voice was warm like slow-burning fire. "You have passed all parts of the test, Joran Hale." Joran felt heat rise to his cheeks. "Thank you, Your Majesty. But I didn't do anything special. Anyone could have done what I did." The king shook his head gently. "No, Joran. Many had the chance. Many tried. Thousands before you faced this test. All of them believed power was the answer. All believed they needed to impress me. But you—" His voice softened further. "You listened." Joran lowered his eyes shyly. Ajarion continued. "You cared not about glory, nor victory, nor proving yourself. You simply cared for the life in your hands. That is why the wormling chose you." Dragons murmured in agreement. Joran looked down again at the little dragon, who shifted slightly in its sleep, pressing closer to him. A warm feeling filled his chest. He smiled without realizing it. Ajarion noticed the smile and his own widened just a little more. It was subtle. But for dragons, who were trained for centuries to read their king's emotions, it was like watching the sunrise after a long winter. Elder Kirael stepped forward. His face was filled with complete shock. His scroll and quill almost slipped from his grasp. "Your Majesty, this is truly extraordinary." The king nodded slowly. "Record every detail. Today marks the first time in centuries that the test has been passed." Kirael scribbled desperately, as if afraid he might forget any moment of it. Ajarion then looked at Joran again. Come stand before me, Joran Hale. The boy stepped forward slowly. His legs still shook a bit, but he managed to keep steady. When he reached the base of the throne steps, the king lowered his head even further. Joran felt the warm breath of the mighty dragon wash over him like a gentle wind. To hatch a wormling is rare, the king said softly. To earn a wormling's bond is rarer still. But to do both through kindness alone. He paused, pride shining in his bright eyes. That is something I have waited centuries to see. The hall shook a little as the dragons murmured with awe. Ajarian slowly lifted a claw the size of Joran's entire body. Joran froze, but the king did not touch him. Instead, he pointed the sharp tip of the claw at Joran's chest, then lowered it respectfully, a gesture of great honor in dragon culture. From this day forward, Ajarian declared, you, Joran Hale, are the chosen keeper of this wormling. Joran blinked hard. Chosen keeper? Ajarian nodded. A role of great trust. You will care for it, nurture it, teach it, and grow with it. In return, it will become your lifelong companion. Joran's breath caught in his throat. A companion? A dragon companion? The baby dragon stirred, opening one tiny eye. It chirped softly and reached a tiny claw toward Joran's chest, as if agreeing with the king's words. The hall exploded in warm murmurs. He is truly chosen. A human keeper. The wormling accepts him. Even the coldest dragons looked impressed. Joran swallowed. Your Majesty, I'll do my best. I promise. The king's voice softened. You already have. A chorus of warm flames rose as torches flared with golden light. The palace seemed to glow brighter, welcoming the new bond formed before it. Joran felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. He had no idea how to be a keeper. He didn't know the rules, the responsibilities, or the expectations, but he would learn. He knew he would, because the little wormling trusted him, and he couldn't let it down. Ajarian turned to the gathered dragons. This young human has shown that strength is not always measured in might. Sometimes it is measured in gentleness. The crowd lowered their heads in agreement. Then the king looked at Joran again with a gentle expression. Tell me, young one, do you know what name you shall give the wormling? Joran's eyes widened. I get to name it? Ajarian nodded. A keeper always names their bond partner. Joran looked down at the tiny dragon. He hadn't expected this question. What name fit such a beautiful little creature? The wormling had golden scales and warm eyes, and it had shown such courage to push through fear and hatch. Joran thought carefully. Then, almost without thinking, he whispered, Ember. The baby dragon opened both eyes and chirped happily as if approving. Ajarian's face softened. A good name. Simple and warm. Like your heart. Joran felt embarrassed again and hid his face behind the wormling, but Ember chirped loudly as if asking him to be confident. Ajarian then spoke loudly, his voice echoing through the great chamber. Let it be known throughout Pyrestone and beyond. The wormling born today shall be called Ember, and the keeper chosen by fate is Joran Hale. Flames burst upward from the lava channels in celebration. Dragons cheered, a sound like rolling thunder shaking the hall. The excitement spread like wildfire across the citadel. News would travel far, to other dragon clans, to distant kingdoms, to human settlements. Everyone would hear that a simple human stable boy had done something extraordinary. But while the dragons celebrated, Joran felt something shift beside him. Ajarian stepped closer, lowering his head once more. For the first time in living memory, the Dragon King spoke words almost no one had ever heard from him. Thank you, Joran. Joran stared, wide-eyed. Me? Why thank me? The king closed his eyes gently. Because you reminded me of something I had forgotten. He paused as if choosing the right words. That kindness is a strength. That hope is worth waiting for. and that even the smallest act can keep a fire alive. Joran felt a strange warmth spread through him, something gentle, something proud, something that felt older than time itself. Ajarion straightened. The smile you saw today, it has been centuries since I last felt it. That is a gift you have given me. Joran didn't know what to say, so he simply bowed deeply, holding Ember close against his chest. The dragons watched silently. Ajarion then stepped back, lifting his wings in a grand motion. All tests are complete. Let the feast be prepared. Tonight we celebrate the rebirth of hope. Dragons cheered again. But Joran didn't move. He stood quietly with Ember in his hands, overwhelmed, amazed, and filled with a quiet determination. The world had changed around him in a single day, and he knew his life would never be the same again. The celebration in Pyrestone's throne hall lasted long into the night. Dragons of every size, shape, and color roared with excitement, sang songs of victory, and shared warm meals of roasted magma fruit and mineral-rich delicacies. The lava streams glowed brighter than ever, reflecting off the scales of hundreds of dragons gathered together. Firelight danced across the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to move like gentle waves. And yet, amid all the excitement, one small human boy moved quietly through the hall, holding a tiny golden wormling in his hands. Joran Hale had never imagined such a moment. A few hours ago, he had been a simple stable boy, swept dust in the stables, and fed the hatchlings of Pyrestone's royal dragons. Now he was the chosen keeper, the one who had earned the trust of a newborn dragon and, more surprisingly, had brought a smile to the Dragon King himself. Joran knelt beside Ember, who had now fully awakened. The baby dragon stretched tiny wings that glimmered in the warm torchlight and let out a small squeak, nudging against Joran's palm. "You're safe now," Joran whispered, stroking Ember's soft scales. "And I'll make sure you grow strong." Ember chirped as if agreeing, then curled into Joran's lap, closing its eyes for a brief rest. Across the hall, Ajarion watched the scene quietly. His expression, still calm, held a rare warmth. No warrior or noble had ever brought him such satisfaction. The king leaned on a massive claw, lowering himself to look closer at the human boy and the wormling. "You did not need strength," the Dragon King said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "You did not need magic. You simply had a heart that understood life. That is more powerful than any blade, any fire, or any spell." Joran felt his face heat up. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he murmured, unsure if his words were enough. The king nodded. "It is time for others to see what you have done." From the hall's edge, Elder Kirael stepped forward. "Your Majesty, should we invite ambassadors from other realms to witness this event?" Ajarion considered the suggestion. "Yes. Let it be known that a human has proven themselves worthy. Let the galaxy see that strength is not always measured by power alone, but by the courage to care." Joran's heart skipped a beat. Humans were often underestimated in Pyrestone. They were small, fragile, and ordinary compared to the dragons who lived for centuries and wielded great magic. And yet today, a simple human had done what thousands of dragons could not. He looked down at Ember. "We did it," he whispered. "We really did it." The baby dragon chirped in response, nudging closer as if it understood perfectly. The following weeks were busy and full of lessons. Joran had been appointed as Ember's official keeper, a role that came with many responsibilities. He learned how to feed Ember not just proper minerals and lava fruits, but also how to help the wormling strengthen its fire safely. He practiced daily exercises with the young dragon, guiding its tiny wings, teaching it balance, and encouraging the first sparks of controlled flame. Joren discovered that keeping a dragon happy and healthy was far more difficult than sweeping floors or brushing scales. Yet it was also far more rewarding. Every chirp, every small movement, every tiny burst of fire from Ember reminded him that life was precious and that patience was often stronger than power. The Dragon King continued to watch from afar. Ajarian allowed Joren's space to grow, offering advice only when necessary and always with a calm, quiet respect. The king still rarely spoke, but when he did, his words carried weight. One evening, after a long day of training Ember, Joren sat outside on a ledge overlooking the glowing lava streams. The young dragon lay against him, warm and sleepy. "I never thought I would have a dragon companion," Joren whispered softly, "and I never thought the Dragon King would smile at me." Ember chirped softly in response. Joren knew he had changed. Before, he had been invisible to most of the citadel. People barely noticed a stable boy unless he did something wrong. But now, dragons and humans alike looked at him differently. Some were curious, others were impressed, and many were inspired. Even older dragons, those who had once dismissed humans as weak and insignificant, now asked questions, hoping to learn from the boy who had succeeded where others failed. The Dragon King's smile, though rare and subtle, had begun to appear more often. Not wide or careless, but present enough that those who watched could sense a shift. The ancient king, once so unapproachable, now looked warmer, lighter, almost as if the boy's actions had reminded him of a long-forgotten truth, that even in a world full of power, compassion held a unique strength. Word of Joren's success spread far beyond Pyrestone. Ambassadors arrived from distant realms, humans, elves, dwarves, and even beings from star systems where dragons were spoken of only in myths. They came to witness the bond between a human and a dragon, and to understand what it meant to pass the Dragon King's test. Joren welcomed them humbly. He showed them Ember, demonstrating the gentle exercises, the feeding rituals, and the care necessary to help a young dragon grow. Observers were amazed that such a small human could manage a creature that many assumed would be too powerful, too wild, or too dangerous for him. More importantly, Joren showed them the simple truth that had allowed him to succeed. Kindness, patience, and understanding were forms of power. Dragons who had once laughed at humans now watched with admiration. Humans who had felt overlooked now felt proud. Slowly, attitudes began to change. The citadel of Pyrestone, and perhaps even the wider realms, were beginning to understand that greatness did not always belong to the strongest or the most magical. It could belong to anyone who truly cared. Days turned into weeks, and Joren and Ember grew closer. The young dragon began to show extraordinary abilities, keen sight, surprising agility, and a gentle warmth that extended even beyond its body. Joren discovered that Ember responded best to calm instruction rather than force. When he used patience instead of impatience, Ember's sparks of flame became stronger, steadier, and more controlled. Other dragons began to respect Joren's teaching. Some even asked him to train their own hatchlings in the ways he had guided Ember. In time, Joren became a teacher, not just a keeper. He traveled across the citadel, helping dragons understand young hatchlings and encouraging them to listen, observe, and care. Ajarian observed silently, but always approvingly. Occasionally, the king would step into the training area, watching from above, and nod in acknowledgement. That subtle nod carried more weight than 1,000 words. The other dragons began to whisper to one another, "Perhaps humans are not so weak after all." And some of the older dragons admitted quietly to themselves, "We underestimated them for too long." One evening, after a particularly long day of training, Joren sat on the edge of the citadel walls, watching the lava streams shimmer below. Ember lay asleep beside him, tiny wings tucked tightly against its body. The world was quiet, save for the gentle crackle of the lava and the distant hum of the citadel at rest. Joren reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. Just a few weeks ago, he had been invisible, unnoticed, and ordinary. Now he was a keeper, a teacher, and someone the Dragon King trusted. The wormling had grown stronger every day, and the citadel itself seemed brighter, more hopeful. He smiled quietly to himself. Maybe. Humans really can make a difference, he whispered. Ember stirred in response, chirping softly, as if agreeing with him. In that quiet moment, Joren realized the true meaning of the Dragon King's test. It had never been about strength, courage, or magic. It had been about understanding life, offering care, and inspiring hope. And by passing it, Joren had not only changed Ember's life, but had changed the Dragon King's heart, and perhaps the future of the entire realm. News of the human stable boy's success traveled across realms. Humans were no longer considered insignificant. Dragons, who had once believed humans weak and ordinary, now sought to learn from them. The concept of strength itself began to change. It was no longer measured by how much power one could wield, but by how much one could give, how much one could care, and how much one could inspire. Joren, once an overlooked stable boy, had become a symbol of hope, a bridge between humans and dragons, and a reminder that greatness could emerge from the most unexpected places. He had shown that even the smallest, most ordinary beings could rise to do extraordinary things when they acted with kindness, courage, and heart. And so, life in Firestone changed forever. The citadel became a place where dragons and humans learned from one another. New hatchlings were nurtured with care, warriors began to understand the power of patience, and even the Dragon King smiled more often. Small, subtle smiles, but genuine ones. Joren held Ember close, feeling warmth not just from the dragon but from a sense of belonging and purpose. He knew that the journey ahead would not always be easy, but he also knew that together, with heart, courage, and understanding, they could face anything. The world had changed, and humanity had risen, not through force, not through magic, but through heart. And in Firestone, the legend of the human stable boy who made a Dragon King smile would never be forgotten.